for the listeners, can you define what browse is?
So browse is any tree or brush species that an animal would eat. So some browse is appropriate feed and some is toxic. The tree actually says, hey, you're eating too much of me. I'm going to put this poison out into the leaf, and that causes those animals to move on. There's an argument that a giraffe is not a big cow, right? It's a browser and not a grazer. If we could figure out that oak really wasn't such the big bad boogeyman that we think it is, that would be a game changer.
One of the things I've heard going on all these ranches is their philosophy is, I'll just get some browsers and I'll kick them out on 300-400 acres. Now, is that sustainable?
At some point, you're going to start killing those trees.
I feel like a lot of people don't understand that browse is for more than giraffes.
Kangaroo species, any of those marsupials, the deer species, all of them can benefit from browse. If you have penned animals in your care, offer them browse and see who eats it. That's definitely the trend where we're headed with animals in our care is browse. Browse is the way.
As you know, and as you've probably heard, if you are listening to all of our podcasts, the more influence we have on these platforms, the more guests we can have. So I'm asking you, please comment below. Literally pause and go comment. You could comment whatever you want. But comment, share this. If you text it to your friends, your family, whatever it would be. I know I sound like an influencer, and I will always say that because I feel stupid asking. But please like, subscribe, share, comment, whatever you need to do. It's going to help boost our algorithm. It's going to help boost our numbers. And again, thank you for watching the Droptine Studios podcast. Welcome back to the Droptine Studios podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of having Dr. Alison Harper. We have known each other for a little over 10 years now, but we were recently at a private giraffe owners event, and we were talking about browse. So I asked Allison, since she only lives 20 minutes from me, to come in and bless us with her knowledge. So Allison, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's really an honor, and to be able to share a passion for browse. It's not just for giraffe. Like, we'll find that there are so many species that really do benefit. But the giraffe, of course, are our highlight and our love. We have just a private facility in Sisterdale. It's a USDA accredited place where we breed and talk about conservation and outreach to the community. And then we go hand in hand with our family business, which is JRH Exotics. And so it's a safe capture and transport and assessment of ranches for consultation. And so anyway, it's a great hybrid situation, but we love browse. So we'd love to talk about it today.
Yeah, so real quick, tell us a little bit about your background, specifically, like what your doctorate in, where did you go to school, and what do you do for a living outside of those full-time other jobs? Perfect.
So I am a veterinarian by trade. I'm a double Aggie. Went to Texas A&M for biomedical science in my undergrad, and then I stayed on for my veterinary degree. I did an equine internship with Bracken Equine at Dr. Robert Balls in San Antonio. And then from there, I joined Kendall County Veterinary Center, which is a mixed animal practice here in Boerne. So it's been just such a journey. I guess if you had asked me as a new grad if I would be ever talking about browse and giraffe, I would have just kind of laughed because I was planning on just being a horse vet. So here we are, like 14 years out into practice. I met my husband and love of my life, and over a sick baby zebra. So I was the new vet, and they said, "Oh, just send the new vet. She'll take care of that zebra." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I don't know anything about zebras, but we treated it like a little donkey, and then I guess the rest was history. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So while we're on that subject, how do you treat zebras like most equine, or?
Yeah, they're an equine species. Of course, they're flighty. They're not handled like horses, so you do have to treat them like an exotic that they are. They're prone to being a little bit dangerous, so they're really not a pet, and you really need to have appropriate handling facilities or people who know how to handle them. But there are some really cute little zebras and halters running around. You just have to be careful.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, as I mentioned earlier, for the listeners, we have known each other forever.
Yep.
You are great family friends of ours, but when you were at this event, obviously you were there to speak a little bit, and that's what spurred this podcast. And so you're talking about browse.
Yes.
So for the listeners, can you define what browse is?
Sure. So browse is any tree or brush species that an animal would eat. So some browse is appropriate feed and some is toxic. It depends on their availability either in the wild or in a pen setting. So when you're feeding browse, you want to make sure that you're feeding the right species, the right quantity, that the animal, well, not all of them, they don't always like all the browse, even if it's non-toxic. So there's a very regimented list of these are the species that we feed in the zoo setting, but we're a ranch, and so there's limited availability here in Texas, and sometimes we have to collaborate on what is appropriate species to feed and which species of tree. So we brought some examples. We have all kinds of really good browse species here. And
I assume all these are native to Texas.
Yeah, these are our native ones. So like I have grapevine, we've got cedar elm. These are all tree species. This is a hackberry tree, which is kind of a trash tree, but the giraffe love it. It's like one of their favorite. We feed pecan. Ooh, here's a big one. Here's a pecan, and we feed willow. So one of the things people ask all the time is, can they eat cedar? It's like, we'd be in big business if they could.
Right.
But actually, cedar is not one of the things that we feed, mainly because they just don't like it. I mean, you'll see some pastures where, especially out on ranches, where the browse has been browsed up, especially even in cedar pastures, but that's not appropriate really for them. That's just a signal that they probably need more browse things, and they're just eating that because that's what they have available to them.
It's the only option.
It's the only option. And they're finding that is the case also in Africa. So, giraffe and kudu and bongo, all those species that actually browse, when they have the ability to migrate, what they do, and they have enough room, then they eat a tree species until that tree produces its own defenses. The most common one is tannins. And so the tree actually says, hey, you're eating too much of me. I'm going to put this poison out into the leaf, and that causes those animals to move on. And that's one of the ways that migration happens. Browsing species are here too long, tannins are formed in the tree, and then those animals move to a new pasture. Well, even in Africa, a lot of those places are starting to be high fenced and managed. And so those animals have no choice but to stay there and browse on trees that have a high tannin value. And so in Africa, they're using some tannin blockers, which is looks like a big mineral block, and it allows the animal to lick the block. It has a sweetener in it, makes them want to do it, but it helps block the tannins so they don't get sick from eating trees that normally they would have moved on from.
So are tannins, well, I guess let's break that down in and of itself. Is that anything visible that you can see?
It's not visible. It's a chemical that's in the plant. And so the most notable one here is the live oak. So it's actually a whole nother topic. I'd love to come back and do a follow-up session on what we find. But essentially, oak is really popular here. There's a lot of people who feed oak at least some amount of the time. And some giraffe species, or some ranches have giraffes that feed, that's all they feed, because it's all they have available, and they just don't have this browse. Like I cut all this browse this morning, so like I know all the good places to get the good stuff. But if you're a ranch and all you have is oak and that's all your animals eat, there is some argument that maybe the tannins in the oak are not as big of a deal as we think they are. So when you research any of the zoo browse species list, they all say, caution on oak because of tannins. Well, that probably stemmed from cattle, because cattle actually are more sensitive to tannins, but goats aren't. You'll see people feed live oak to their goats all the time as like a treat, or some of the goats climb the trees and eat the oak. So there's an argument that a giraffe is not a big cow, right? It's a browser and not a grazer. And a cow and a sheep are grazers. They want to eat grass as their primary forage. But goats and giraffe and bongo and kudu, they want to eat branches. So is there something about their physiology that we're still trying to protect them from the tannins, because we know this potentially is a problem, and why feed something if you have other options? But is there argument, and is there a place where we can start diving deeper into, is the oak here actually a low enough tannin that they could eat it year round? Because that would be a game changer. we have to be really careful in the summer months cutting oak because of oak wilt.
Right.
And so anytime you cut oak, you want to make sure that you seal the wound on the tree. But at the same time, if we could feed oak year round, even if it's just a small percentage of their diet, so maybe I feed hackberry or mulberry or one of those other things, and then a little bit of oak, then that's just less browse I have to physically go get. And our property, we've got a lot of native species other than oak, but we have to be really judicious about how we trim those trees. So that way, one, they're always going to be there for us. We're not just hacking down trees and we want to almost, if you will, cultivate them. So if we could figure out that oak really wasn't such the big bad boogeyman that we think it is, we're working with Cheyenne Mountain Zoo to develop a study on that. So we can, have some arborists involved. Like, for instance, just like in Africa, if you use that model, an oak tree may change the amount of tannins based on how often it's browsed. That's a hypothesis, so I don't know that. But if that's the case, well, then could we take an oak tree and measure its tannins untouched, and then we trim it up, whatever percentage we decide, 10% of its foliage or something. Then we go back and test it in a week. Did its tannins increase? And if that's the case, well, then maybe we just mark that tree and we give it 6 more months until the tannins come back down to its original level, and then it's safe. Or is it the case that oak trees don't make more tannins? The amount of tannins that they have is what they have. They're not special like the ones in like the acacia in Africa. So I think there's an opportunity here to really learn a lot. And there's a lot of zoo and kind of on the academia side, individuals that are like super excited about the private sector having giraffe because we don't have that red tape. We can start doing some of these things and finding out answers because there's a lot of giraffe in Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, Cheyenne Mountain Zoo was like surprised. They're like, wait a minute, how many? And that's like not everybody's USDA, so not reporting the numbers of giraffes that they have in private hands.
So how do you test for tannins? Is it like just taking samples and sending it to a lab?
That's my understanding. So we're still in the early phase of figuring that out, but they've kind of figured that out in Africa already. So they have assays for being able to determine, what the tannin levels are because they've made those tannin blockers. They know it's a problem there, and they're already a light years ahead of us on that. But in the U.S., oak really hasn't been on anybody's radar. Like nobody wants to spend money on that study because it really didn't affect anybody. In Africa, it really affected them, right? Because that was part of their game preserves and that kind of thing. But for us, as browse becomes more popular, how can we use what we have here? And they do like oak. So that's the other thing is, so for instance, cottonwood. Cottonwood is on the approved browse list, but if we feed cottonwood, the giraffe just turn their nose up at it. They just let it sit there and wilt. They have no interest in it. And then maybe that's just our species, like our particular pen, but that species of tree is just not super palatable. Same with sycamore. I mean, we can feed sycamore and they kind of leave it up for a couple days. They kind of like, man, are they going to bring something else tomorrow? I guess they're not. So maybe I'm going to eat this rather than, just chowing down like it's hackberry or grapevine or one of the others.
So is there a place, because like I am probably the worst at identifying any forage, any plant, anything.
Yes.
I've just has never been in my repertoire. So is there like a tool to be able to use for people to know what kind of browse they have on their property? Yeah.
So there's a couple apps actually. There's like Picture This, there's Google Lens, and there's Seek. All those are free apps.
Just SEEK?
SEEK, yeah. And I use those apps. They're not perfect, but they're getting better. The Dallas Zoo also has a browse program where they have pictures where they're like, these are the approved species that you can actually come and bring to the zoo. And then they feed, which is a really cool like partnership with the community. Those they have really good pictures online as to which species. And as you look at them, I mean, you'll end up starting to see that the leaves are just all pretty unique and different. I mean, the hackberry is kind of rough and it's rounded, whereas like the pecan is long and thin and it has a certain growth pattern. And you'll start becoming what we call a browse bandit.
Yep.
Where you're just driving on the side of the road and you're like, look at that hackberry. I think we should pull over and just trim it up a little bit for the city,
Do you keep a saw in the back of your truck or in the back of your Excursion?
I do.
Yep.
And a trailer usually. So if you see don't call the cops, but if you see a bright green shirt like this, says Browse Bandit on the side, don't call me in. They know I'm there. I'm trimming. No, but it's good. I mean, it's a way that we are sustainable. We have to find partnerships in the community because there's just not enough for us to cut at our place. So neighbor ranches, we have,
You're welcome to come to our place now that we're neighbors.
Yeah, we're neighbors. Yeah, and it's good. It's good because the hackberry tree is especially, or even the grapevine can be kind of a nuisance. So if we can get in there and help maintain some of that, that's great.
So what do those other partnerships look like in the city or community? So obviously, like I just said, you can come to my property, you can cut. I trust y'all, but are there any other outlets that you are able to use? Yeah, I mean, some of them are, some of the schools we've already had them talk to us about, hey, these are the species. We have some tree trimmers that will call us and say, hey, we have a big load of hackberry, can we bring it by, or pecan? But it's mainly word of mouth. And those are the kinds of places that we really want to make sure that, we're respectful of the property. We trim it as they want to trim. Gates are closed, just to where that this is something that we can all be doing something mutually beneficial. Most people like their trees trimmed. Sure. Yeah. And that'd be my other question is if you're getting stuff off the side of the highway or if you have local tree trimmers that you're working with, or I think in your presentation, you showed them dumping it at a dump site and then you had to go get it. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you know that it's not like sprayed with pesticides or something like that? Like, is there a way to check? There's really not a way to check. I mean, and part of it is, those pesticides, just like when you get your lawn sprayed for fleas and they say, keep the dog out of the yard for, 6 hours or something. So the chances of once it's dried, they're usually innocuous. So it killed the pest, it dried, but it's not toxic anymore to the animals. So unless you happen to get it right in that window where stuff was sprayed, I think your risk is pretty low. And most of the big ranches I'm going to, or even in the city or whatever, it's not like a cropland that they're constantly getting sprayed. So it's been pretty safe. We haven't had any issues. Yeah. It's good. We'll hopefully try to keep it that way. Yeah, exactly. So earlier you described the plants or the browse that are native to here. Is there any similarity into what they're eating here versus what they have in Africa? Not really. Yeah, it's a totally different landscape over there. I mean, they've really mapped it out, and to the point where they can know, there's a really great study where they took a giraffe herd and they followed it, a tower of giraffe actually, and they would watch them eat, and then they would go quantify which species they ate, and it changed seasonally too. So I don't know if it's because that certain tree or bush, had less tannins at that time of year, or they just preferred it at this time, or the leaves were, not about to drop then, or however that works. But they could have, they did some really great research where they could say, January and February, these are the species that mostly got browse, and then February, March, that kind of thing. So it's similar to here for us because there's only so many months out of the year, even in Texas, that we have browsable species. Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, for instance, is in Colorado, right? And half of the year it's cold and they don't have browse species, and they feed a lot of elm. And elm up there is, drops its leaves. So they're kind of struggling with that too. So what do you do? What does that look like? So for us, starting about March to about October, November, the leaves that have trees are the pecan, the hackberry, the grapevine, the mulberry, and the cedar elm. But right about October, that's when the color change starts happening. So October, November, December, we're looking at feeding more like Bradford pear, which actually turns a really beautiful orange and red color right before it drops its leaves. So that's kind of our signal. I usually do a call on some of my Facebook groups, hey, if you have a Bradford pear, it's November, can I come trim it now? And I usually don't trim it the rest of the year because I know that gives me a little bit longer of a window for fresh browse.
So Bradford pear is probably one of the last ones. And then after that is willow. And so willow is a real pain because it grows in like every bar ditch. It's very much a weed. You can have ornamental willows like, a weeping willow, or those are maybe more ornamental, but I'm just talking about the straight up weed willow that's growing rapidly. And each year I can go into those kind of community areas and I can cut all the way flush to the ground. And you're thinking, gosh, man, how? But by the next year, it's just as big and just as beautiful as it was the year before. So willow, I don't cut until like basically December. And maybe even, depending on how mild it is, January. But then January, February, and the beginning of March, before all the leaves start coming out, we're feeding a dried browse. So there are a few species we found that you can make actually almost like a hay. And doesn't have quite the vitamins and minerals and water content that it does when it's fresh, but it still is enrichment. They still clean up the sticks all the way from down to like a 1/4-inch stick. They'll completely browse that down, even if it's dry. So pecan dries well. They actually will eat the sycamore when it's dried. They prefer that than fresh. And maybe because they're just like, this is all I'm getting.
Yeah, they don't have an option.
Yeah, they don't have an option. And cedar elm will hold on decently. So those three, what we do starting about October, before there's any real obvious color change, we'll start trimming double time what we feed that day. And then we save some that we hang. We have it's just a big, long covered barn that's protected from the wind. And because dried leaves can be a little bit fragile, so we want to make sure that it's not just, it has at least two sides are covered. And then we hang that to dry. And then we'll feed that like December all the way through. We'll usually be done by about February with the dried stuff. And then there are 2 companies here in the US that actually have browse farms.
I was going to say that's a broad spectrum.
Yes.
When you're going to say 2, I thought you were going to say 2 in Texas, but 2 in the US.
It's a real problem. It's a bottleneck because they're feeding all of the zoos. So all those northern zoos that have species that need to browse, not just giraffe, but their kudu, their okapi, their bongo, but also things like kangaroos and like the little deer, like for our muntjac, we feed our muntjac browse, any of the elk species. So all that need is pretty intense come the wintertime here in the US. So one's in Florida and one is in Arizona, and both of them ship. So, one of the browse companies ships via FedEx, which is pretty convenient, although very expensive. So, depending on where you're located. And then the other browse company you have to pick it up at the airport. And so if you're picking up a box of browse, some facilities are feeding a box a day. We're not quite on that level yet, but some of those zoos are getting multiple boxes of varieties.
So when you say box, are we talking like the box my watch will fit in, a box that this table fits in? How big is a box?
It's like a box that a 40-pound bag of dog food fits in. So it's only this big. And they shove it in there. They really try to maximize how much branches go in there, but it's a problem. To the point where we've talked about what could we do, make some hoop houses and grow some high, like a fast growing willow species maybe, or the acacia is what we get from the browse farm, and the giraffe like it, but it's very cold sensitive. So, now you're thinking, okay, what kind of I love browse so much, but what kind of investment am I doing here to grow it in Texas when we do have that snow apocalypse?
Right.
That happens.
And so
a couple weeks a year.
Yeah. Is there a difference in fresh browse versus dried browse as far as like the nutrients and protein that they get from it?
Yeah, certainly. It's the same as hay versus grass, right? If you had the opportunity to, have all of the actual vitamins and minerals that are in a fresh, then it's better. But also it's just they like it better. They eat it better.
I prefer fresh steak over leftover steak
right,
as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think if we could figure out a way, we planted a small browse farm at our place, and it's willow. And there are other places that are trying it, but by the time you plant a tree now, it's probably going to be 4 or 5 years, even in a fast-growing species, that you'd even be able to cut it in any sustainable way. And then you're thinking, well, gosh, how many acres of trees do I really need to plant to make this happen? Hence the oak study. Like, what really is the sustainable option here, and can we feather that in? So Long Neck Manor is one of the other places. They're just in Fredericksburg, and they're going to collaborate with us on this project too. So we're really super excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah. How can we do better for South Texas?
Protect your investment, preserve your records, promote responsible wildlife management. The Exotic Wildlife Association Animal Registry is working in conjunction with the Veterinary Genetics Lab at UC Davis. This provides secure, professional record keeping for the exotic wildlife owners and breeders across the country. From documenting pedigrees to ownership to promoting herd management and conservation goals, the EWA Registry is a trusted resource for our industry. Whether you own one animal or manage an entire ranch, the EWA Animal Registry is here to help. Learn more today at myewa.org. That's myewa.org. We are really good at our job. We just happen to sell convenience. If you're looking for someone to help run your business, whether it's social media, rebuild your website, whatever it may be, contact us today at droptinestudios.com. Yeah, and so the two ways that I've seen it stored is yours.
Yep.
And like you said, it's just kind of like a TP type thing. You're draping the foliage over, letting it dry out. And then once it's dried out, where do you store it?
We have cattle panel that's welded to the top, like purlins in our barn. And then we just hang it with a piece of string and then stack it in like dried flowers. So it's upside down. The leaves actually stay on pretty good. And then as we go to feed it, then we cut down what you're going to need. Obviously throw away the string because we don't want the giraffe or any animals to have any access to that. And then we feed it in multiple ways. We have some slow feeders that are like big barrels with holes in them. So that way they have to actually just use their tongue to get in there and take the branches out. Slows them way down because nothing is more disappointing than you spending all morning cutting a bunch of browse and hanging it, and then they're done in about 30 seconds. And you're like, that was... Wow, you're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it, but that took a lot of my time to get that done. So we try to make a puzzle for them. If you spend, of your 24 hours, if you only spend 1 hour a day in a meal, what are you going to do for 23 more hours? You're going to be doing things like licking your stall wall and, putting your head in places it shouldn't go in the enclosure, or, grazing grass in your enclosure, which is not normal for giraffe to want to do. And that's how they can transmit parasites to each other, because that fecal oral route, and giraffe shouldn't be wanting to graze. They should want to be up in the trees and browse. So parasites aren't in the trees, they're on the grass. So we start looking at what is that when we don't give them opportunities to forage and browse in long periods of time, then they start doing other things that are not part of their natural behavior. And in human care, our goal is to have these animal ambassadors have like the very best life. Like, we want them to feel like they're doing their part to help their counterparts in Africa be part of the conservation movement. But the only way people learn about giraffe and touch a giraffe and get passionate about it is to have them where we can see them and touch them. And, that's kind of our goal at the ranch. So if you want to do better by giraffe, then you're going to find out ways to make them happy where they are.
Right.
And so slow feeders is the way to go. Our whole pen is cattle panel, which is that really stiff 4x4 metal mesh. So if you hang the browse on the outside, they have to work through the fence the whole time to get it.
It's like a built-in slow feeder.
A built-in slow feeder. So, and if you're in like, some enclosures are just like wire, or they're pipe without any mesh, then they're going to clean up the browse pretty quick. So you need some sort of way to facilitate that.
But then it's harder for people to feed them and touch them and do all the things.
Yeah, you got to get up on the platform, get eye to eye. And then my dad, he's just an inventor of all things. So we really wanted to see how giraffe ate browse in different ways. Like, do they prefer it one way versus the other? Well, his little browse feeder by far their favorite. And it's really a pretty ingenious design. This gets welded up onto the pipe, like upright like this. And then a pretty decent diameter branch that's straight goes through here. And then you pull this spring back, and there's a little, like a clevis right here that actually stabs into the branch. So as the giraffe are very notorious for pulling branches, and they're very strong, they're expecting the tree to be intact. They use their tongue to wrap all the way around the branch and strip the leaves. So if you don't have a good way to make a branch secure, then they're just going to take it. So by doing this, the giraffe we can put in a branch here that's like 15 feet tall, like taller than their head. And it's so fun to watch them because they're looking at it like, God, there's something taller than me. How am I gonna do that? And to see them have behaviors where they're cooperating together to bring the branch down for another giraffe to come up and eat it. So our big bull loves to do that. He'll go up there and he gets the biggest, tallest branch and he bends it down. She's eating it. And he's like, wait, I think I want to eat some. And then it pops up and he's like, God bless, who's going to bring the branch down for me? But just to give them something different in some puzzle, something for them to think about. And so that's another neat way to do it. Some people will use pulleys in their barns or in their shade structures where, one of the really great ways to do it is you have a pulley and then over time throughout the day, it drops lower. So as they've browsed for a couple hours, the bottom quarter of their bundle, then you can just drop it a little lower. And so that way, that's another way to slow down their feeding and make them kind of sit there and think about like, oh, how am I going to reach that?
Right. So then the second way I've seen browse being stored was when we did the pen tour, and it was a ginormous Connex box that's like a reefer truck. It's got it all insulated. It's got AC. It keeps it, I think, at 40 or 50 degrees or something. I can't remember.
I think she was actually freezing it.
Oh, was she?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So very cold.
Yes.
And then, so I assume the reason to do that is because it lasts longer.
Yeah, it preserves that freshness. So when and this is, that's the primo way to do it, right? Is you collect browse, you can collect it all year. You can put it in those Tupperwares, push it down pretty flat. There's no mold situation that you have to worry about. And those, for the day, they'll pull out that Tupperware and they feed that. And as it thaws, or some of them, she even said that her giraffe will eat it cold. They like it kind of crunchy or whatever. So that is another option, but it's a little bit of the bougie option. Yeah. So definitely it's not for everybody, but it works great too. So that's another way to do it. And some people are doing like shipping container or greenhouses with just like a short growing phase of a browse, So I guess you could, if you're inclined to do like a greenhouse work, kind of like we were talking about with the big hoop houses, but they're feeding it just like in a smaller, almost like you see people like grow romaine that way to try to be sustainable and not use land to do it. And they have all the lights and
could you do that with because no matter if you give this to a kangaroo or your giraffe, like you have to use the same branch, right? And ideally you're giving your giraffes the larger ones. Could you use those like greenhouses to feed your smaller species?
Yeah, I think so.
And then give your larger ones?
Yeah, I think so.
So one of the things I wanted to ask as well is some people, like, let's say they want to be absentee landowners. They don't want to have a ranch manager. They don't want to do anything. But one of the things I've heard going on all these ranches is their philosophy is I'll just get some browsers and I'll kick them out on 300-400 acres. Mm-hmm. Now, is that sustainable? Like, I mean, no supplemental feed, no anything, just kick them out where they're at. And then is that sustainable? And would that cause the tannins and stuff to just kick in? Yeah.
So there's an argument that at some point those trees are going to start protecting themselves. And I don't know to what extent, if the oak is really doing that. I mean, that's part of the idea in the study. But one of the things we talk about though is at some point you're going to start killing those trees. I mean, they're going to start, they don't normally browse the bark, but that's going to be the next thing that they're going to start stripping. And when you go to a property and you can see all the way straight through for just as far as the eye can see, you're not feeding enough. I mean, that's not the way that nature was meant to have their trees browse that way. If you have giraffe turned out on your ranch, which there's a lot of places that do it that way, and it's awesome that they have so much space, but they're going to browse those oak trees up to as far as they can reach. And then, like, for instance, Fossil Rim, amazing giraffe facility. I mean, they have had giraffe for decades and they have all done well. They're all turned out on big oak pastures. They have other things too, but they cut other browse so that way their oak trees aren't the only thing. But they basically have browsed them up to look like probably acacia trees in Africa. And now the giraffe are like, now what? You know, I can only reach what I can reach. So I don't know. We need to figure out a way that is sustainable, but also just not cost prohibitive. Like, nobody can spend $200 a week per box to do the right thing forever. I mean, we have to.
Well, that's what I was going to say too, based on like the whatever ranches. Well, one, your giraffe's going to eat all the browse, which means your other species can't have the browse. So you're causing like a trickle effect to prohibit other animals from being animals by being able to do that. But at the same time, it's sustainable until it isn't.
Yes.
And then once it isn't, it's too far gone.
Yes. Yeah.
So no, that's interesting. I'd be curious to see and
so maybe one thing you could consider in that situation, if it was a big enough ranch, maybe you do a pasture rotation. It's not a bad idea for other reasons like parasite control and stuff, but give those understory, give the trees a chance to rest, give the ground a chance to rest, so that way parasites aren't constantly being transmitted to each other. Maybe you browse different species. I mean, if you have the capability of saying, hey, this is going to be giraffe for 3 months, but the other species aren't going to be there, then if there's a way that you could manage it in that way, the giraffe aren't going to eat the really low understory. I mean, they might, but they prefer to browse up high. So then maybe you switch them and then the lower browsers get to come in. But that's a lot of coordination. It's a lot of work. Potentially a lot of risk moving animals unless you can passively move them. But
yeah, well, that's where giraffe training would come in.
That's right.
Shout out to the people that were doing that at the event. But yeah, I mean, that would be, I think, a logistical nightmare as far as being like, oh, let's get homeboy from this 300 acres to this 500 acres.
Yes.
On a whim without having to, which we'll try to get Jeremy on to talk about transportation of giraffes. But I mean, that takes a team.
Yes.
Like, you can't just go out and like move them, like open up one gate and let them through. And I mean, maybe, but
I mean, it takes months to get to the point where a giraffe is trained to want to do that. Cause why would they? Like, what do you have for me that's better than this 300 acres of browse? Like,
So one other thing is, I feel like, we all started this started this podcast based off of us talking about private giraffe ownership. But I feel like a lot of people don't understand that browse is for more than giraffes.
Yeah, for sure.
It's for any and all browsing species. But if the listeners don't know, and hell, I don't know, probably most of them, but will you kind of walk through, you've mentioned a handful, but can you kind of talk about why it's important to feed browse to other exotics?
Yeah, for sure. So it kind of just goes back to their physiology and like what is actually browsing doing? It's increasing the amount of saliva every time they go stick their tongue out and grab a tree branch or a leaf. They're increasing the amount of saliva that they're creating. It's slow. It's a slow process rather than them just like grabbing a handful of hay and just eating it, mouthful of hay and eating it or whatever. So that act of using their tongue, using their lips to strip the leaves or whatever, that is a buffer for their rumen. So at some point earlier in zoo world, we weren't feeding browse specifically for giraffe, and maybe they were fed more like cattle in the, early 80s, 90s, whatever. That started to change, that dynamic started to change when they realized that, hey, these giraffe were going off feed. They aren't actually big cows. And so by physically changing the way that they eat and how they eat slower and how they use their tongues, they're actually buffering that ruminal acidosis. And acid in the rumen is a really terrible thing. It blunts all of the little papilla, which are like finger-like projections in the rumen. And once those are blunted, then they don't have enough surface area to do all of the breakdown of the forage and things that they're eating. So the bacteria, the protozoa, the fungi, they live on all those like little papilla. And when you give them less surface area, then they are struggling to do what their part is. And that acidosis is from not having enough either bicarbonate or a basic thing like saliva. Saliva is very basic. So of the species, basically all the species that like to browse, that can range from like our kangaroo species, any of those marsupials, the deer species, all of them can benefit from browse. I mean, you could, there's hundreds of deer species, including, whitetail, but all the way to axis, to muntjac, all the elk species, they love browse. And that's what they would be eating in there. But we as stewards of them feed them alfalfa. We feed them, which is good, but and expensive. But we also feed them grain, right? Because we're trying to make up for that nutrition, that the protein value that they need, the fat value that they need. Well, grain turns out makes your rumen more acidic. So when we have these animals on a free choice grain, or even a timed feeder, they're having an instant grain rush where they're having a lot of acid in their stomach because they're eating all of this. And that's the problem with like the show industry, right? Or like show stock, like cattle, sheep and goats. You're really pushing them to put on muscle. So you got to pour the grain to them. Well, the problem is they start getting an acidosis in their rumen, and they don't convert like they should. They need forage. So that would be a segue into a rumen talk about like what the rumen is and why it's so cool and why they're way more superior of creatures than we are in the sense of what they can eat and what products we get from that. But so I think my argument would be, if you have penned animals in your care, offer them browse and see who eats it. I mean, you're not, as long as it's a non-toxic species, you're not going to hurt anybody by offering them browse. I mean, if you, and you probably, maybe that'd be a good segue for Droptine to like take pictures of all of the times you were out there taking, photos of ranches. What were they doing? Were they browsing? I mean, all of our deer, I can see pictures of them going up and grabbing the trees, and that kind of thing. So,
since 1967, the Exotic Wildlife Association has supported conservation, advocacy, and education for the exotic wildlife industry. EWA brings together ranchers, breeders, conservationists, hunters, and wildlife professionals who are working to protect the exotic wildlife and preserve the industry for the next generation. EWA members receive access to valuable resources, legislative support, networking, education, and of course the EWA registry. Learn more or become a member today at myewa.org and follow the Exotic Wildlife Association on Facebook. Ranch owners, if you're listening to this podcast and you need help with any of your media or marketing needs, we know how much work it takes to run a ranch. We can help you with your photos, videos, websites, social media, you name it. Droptine Studios sells convenience. So if you would like to learn more about our services, go to droptinestudios.com/contact and we'll set up a one-on-one meeting, and we would love to figure out how we can help you today.
Yeah, we actually, in this last storm we had, there was a tree that fell down, and we went to a fallow breeder, and it fell like it was next to a pond, and it fell into the pond, and you could very quickly, like in a day or two, see all these fallow had just leveled what they could access. And so it's like, and they're getting plenty of feed.
Yeah.
Right. But I think nature's going to do what God designed it to do. And they designed them to eat browse. And so, it's really interesting to see. But I mean, we use that because, talking about the picture side, we try everything from peanuts and crackers and things to just get their attention to come to us, to pose right and do everything. And we've even used browse of like, hey, give me 5 minutes, and the owner goes and runs and cuts some trees off, and like instantly they'll come running to us. It's like, man, can you have like 10 truckloads of this so that we can just like place one all throughout the pen to be like, okay, he's got his head up, get him, get them. I think we have it in some of our promotional videos too, is like unintentionally, but like they'll bend down, pick it up and throw it and play with it. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, every species is desiring it. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really interesting
like, for instance, I don't know that when you're starting to look at, like, even our eland, right? They're an antelope species. They kind of look into the layperson maybe like a cow, but they love browse. Man, browse comes out, they're excited. The Cape buffalo, that's probably not their thing, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't at least offer it and see what they like. If at the very least, if they don't want to eat it, they like you said, want to play with it. That's something that gives them a change to their day and an enrichment. And that, an animal that is in our care that gets that kind of like mental stimulation, they're going to be happier. They'll eat better. They're not stressed. They breed better. There's just all the reasons why you want to think about, like, if you were that animal, how can we make their day-to-day like maximized, right?
Well, and I think too, I just thought of this as you were talking about it and I told that story, is if y'all had these accessible to the public to purchase, that could be a huge benefit of like welding one of those to the fence, because yes, you can throw them on the ground and they're not like giraffes. You're not trying to get them to get their heads up and stuff. But as far as the mental stimulation, that can be a lot better for the animal versus just tossing it on the ground.
For sure.
So now
and they don't step on it. It's kind of
and where are parasites found?
On the ground.
On the ground.
Yeah. So maybe don't feed on the ground. Yeah. But yeah, my dad, if anybody's ever interested, he'll make them. So he's not in the business of making them. He just made them for me, but he's doing there's probably about 4 or 5 zoos now that have them. So they send him. Yeah, it's cool. I like getting videos from him where he's like, look, it's at the zoo. And anyway. So. Yeah,
we'll have to, anyone listening, we'll put Allie's email, or we'll just send them to your dad or whatever you want, but we'll put their contact information in the description that way if you want or want to try one of these. But I would highly recommend it, whether it's for giraffe or fallow or axis, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's it's a really neat thing, and I think people need to understand, and hopefully that's what this podcast can be for, but like most people just think, oh, well, it's just out on the ranch. Right. It's not important. Or we see a ton of that overgrazed where, you see all the way through. But I think if people knew how important browse was, maybe we can start a Facebook page called Browse Bandits where you can put some more information. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting for people to learn what they can do or what they should do with their browse for their animals.
Yeah. And I'm happy to be a resource if, someone in the community says, hey, like I want to be a part of this. I want to feed my animals more browse. How do I go about doing that? I'm an open book, so be happy to share my passion.
So how would you recommend for people to sustain the browse on their property, or even to give it an evaluation?
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I think the easiest thing would be to learn the trees first. And I would maybe even, if your property's big enough that you could use like a Google map or something, you can mark where they are and know which trees have been, like for your staff, hey, let's give this tree a break. Like it needs more time to grow back, and then have a system on how you trim your browse trees. I mean, we should have started 5 years ago, but here we are, and we're planting trees, and hopefully that's what the future is going to be. Is we're fast growing trees that grow 6 or 7 feet a year. Well, I mean, that could be enough for us, especially like a willow. Like I said, like willows in the ditch, I just cut them completely flat. And by the next year, but that's only one feeding, right? I mean, they eat so I guess to give an example, we have 7 giraffe, and then on top of our other species that we have at the ranch, but we try to do a trailer load a day, like a flatbed, 16 foot, as many as I can put in there at my expedition rolls down Bernie with, strap it down. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of work. One of the ways that you can, if you cut a bunch of browse, and you don't necessarily, maybe you have it's a blessing of a day and you have a ton, right? We also have an ability to store it in the shade in water. So that can keep the leaves fresh, just like a florist would do. So we trim them so they're all upright and neatly stacked in water. So that can extend it for a day. But I mean, there are just some species that you kind of like hackberry, you just got to feed that day. It just doesn't last. But like the willow, the cedar elm, the pecan, we can usually get 2 days out if we have just like an awesome harvest
of it.
Yep. And yeah, at the end of the podcast, if you want to put my contact, if someone's like, hey, I heard you, I have some of those species, you're welcome to come trim.
Yeah.
We'll be happy to show up with our own trailer and our own saw, and you just show us where you want us to trim up, and we'll be glad to feed the giraffe. And in return, you could come feed the giraffe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're happy to share them.
Experience.
Yeah. We're happy to share them and, get the word out as much as possible about how awesome giraffe are.
Yeah. Well, I'm about to hit the road for 8 days straight, but maybe when Kylie gets back or when I get back, we'll take y'all to ours property and give you the gate code and let y'all go nuts and do what you can.
We'll have lunch with the giraffe. We'll line up their browse, and then we'll have a little picnic. And
that sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything as far as browse that you feel like we didn't connect on or that we need to touch on?
Yeah, I think that was pretty great. Like I really hope that I've inspired at least one person to just do better.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to help in any way that I can. But that's definitely the trend where we're headed with animals in our care is browse. Browse is the way.
Yeah. I just remembered one other one I was going to ask is how can you tell when a tree is overbrowsed?
Yeah, I guess you're really not going to be able to tell probably from an outward sign. I mean, other than, you'd have to browse a whole heck of a lot of it. And even some trees where you just like I said, we've leveled them like a hackberry that's on a fence line, because some farmers are like, hey, this is a management nightmare. Every year the hackberries just grow all along the fence line as just a general rule. But we just level those suckers flat, and you think, well, I don't know, maybe next year. But I tell you what, it sends out shoots the next year. So I think the only overbrowsed tree that at this time I'm a little concerned about until we know more is the oak, the live oak. And again, just another ploy for cutting during the season of the beetles that spread the oak wilt. We just have to be very careful for our community to not promote oak. Yeah, we just don't want to spread that. So we just have to be careful there.
For nearly 60 years, the Exotic Wildlife Association has united ranchers, breeders, conservationists, and the wildlife professionals committed to protecting exotic wildlife and preserving the exotic wildlife industry. EWA membership gives you a strong voice in legislative advocacy, valuable industry connections, educational resources, and access to programs that support wildlife conservation and responsible stewardship. Join a community dedicated to the future of the exotic wildlife. Learn more and become a member today at myewa.org. On average, our social media management clients save 30 to 40 hours a month. Yes, we're good at our job. Yes, we can make you look really professional, but overall, we're saving you time and hopefully making you money. But if you would like to be consistent in social media and look professional, make sure you reach out to us today at droptinestudios.com and just let us run your social media.
So one thing we've been doing, Daniel, I'm going to need your phone again for the question. We will ask our last guest to leave our future guest, not knowing who you are or what you do, a question.
Oh, man.
So go ahead and start thinking about what your question would be. But our last guest left this question. So they asked, if you were going to go on a dream hunt, what would it be, continent and species specific?
Oh, gosh, a hunt?
Wrong person to ask.
Can it be a photo?
Yeah, we'll do photo. What's your dream animal to photograph?
Oh, man. Well, then that's easy. Hands down, it would be the okapi, because that just doesn't happen. They're just in such a special place in the Congo that they catch them with game cameras. They're using like old school traps, like where they dig a hole and they cover it with leaves and then they go check them and see if an okapi fell in. Like that kind of, like the canopy is so dense, they are actually not able to have the electronic like wall traps and that kind of thing. It's pretty remarkable to hear about the okapi. This last okapi conference we went to. So I guess I'm not going to shoot an okapi, but I'll take a picture.
Yeah. Yeah, as soon as I read that right before we started, I was like, this is the wrong question for the wrong person.
I'm not anti-hunting. I mean, we will harvest an axis deer and feed our family, but that's probably not, that's not my MO.
But that's why I like to do this, is you never know who you're asking, what you're going to get.
Ooh, now I'm going to think of a really good question.
So not knowing who our next guest is, not knowing what they do, what would be a question that you would like them to end the podcast with?
Okay. I think the question would be...
Watch the next episode to find out her question.
Well, Allie, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your wisdom on the podcast.
Yeah, had fun.
I think y'all will be seeing Allie again, not only because she's local, but a good family friend, but also has a wealth of knowledge. And literally before we even started this podcast, we were talking about what the next podcast was going to be.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think there's just like room for everybody to learn. And I love what you're doing here. So thank you for making our industry better.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, Allie.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone for tuning into this podcast. Again, I'm going to sound like the typical influencer. If you would like, subscribe, share, comment, do all the things, push all the buttons. But thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.
Thanks.